MCVC 1195. 1195.
You missed that by so much.
Oh, you've got a ruler?
We've got a ruler which measures 1 yard.
Or 1 metre.
No. A metre measures 3'3". It's longer than a yard, you see.
Thursday on BBC One, Johnny Jarvis, an account of the friendship of two boys growing up in London. It begins in their final year at school, with the awkward adjustments they must make as they face the future, and make a break with the idealism of their youth. Not yet adult, but no longer a child, the first of 6 years in the life of Johnny Jarvis starts on Thursday at 9:25 on BBC One.
Hello, I'm Andrew.
Hello, I'm Lisa.
Welcome to episode 37 of...
Round the Archives.
I thought I'd make you laugh. Right, it's going to be a biggie.
Yes.
So we won't faff about.
No.
So...
Nothing to correct.
No, let's just get on with it.
Okay.
Links will be very short.
Yes.
So, we welcome back Martin Holmes, who looks at...
the thick of it.
First appearing in a very brief 3-part series on BBC 4 in 2005, The Thick of It was very much the bastard child of Yes Minister, given that it was conceived when creator Armando Iannucci championed that series for a completely different series about the greatest sitcoms ever, and thought it might be ripe for an update of some kind in the horrid, torrid and thoroughly sweary era of spin and press manipulation in the more modern British political era of the early 2000s. Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister are, of course, more than a little bit utterly brilliant, so this was no small task, but with a tiny budget and initially a very small cast, and based upon a short sketch, a little piece of satirical treasure, a sweary adult and very sophisticated legend, of course, but there you go, was sneaked out onto what was very much a minority channel in those days, and a comedy legend was born, albeit one you might not want to watch with your parents in the room with you. The show's creator, Armando Iannucci, purely coincidentally, has a background of Scottish-Italian roots which is similar to that of series star Peter Capaldi, but that's all it is really. So we're not going to let any Scottish political mafia conspiracy theories sneak into this particular piece. Oh no. Well, not unless we're told by the RTA editorial Rottweiler that we are definitely going to sneak that Scottish political mafia theory out into the world because it's in the public interest. Anyway, it's not standing behind me, is it? Anyway, after steadily working his way up through the ranks of BBC production, Armando Iannucci worked on Radio 4's On the Hour, the series that ultimately became television's The Day Today, a seminal series which ultimately begat several incarnations of Alan Partridge and gave a career boost to a whole host of comedy stars over the next decade. Armando Iannucci also began performing in series like The Friday Night Armistice, and even had an eponymous sketch show broadcast by Channel 4, the impact of which seems to have been lost in the maelstrom following 9/11, although I do remember seeing it at the time, and the Care Home for Middle-Aged Men sketch remains a terrifyingly hilarious high point for me, at least, and I've pointed people in its direction time and again ever since. Go on, watch it, it's funny. It's also not funny at all, from a particular point of view, actually, being a middle-aged man, of course. Meanwhile, the thick of it was brewing up nicely. The first episode is fairly typical in that at first appearances, in terms of an actual plot, nothing very much seems to happen. One Minister of the Crown is manipulated into resigning, another is duly put in place, a mistake is made, and there's a scramble to put it right, or at least less wrong, and that's about it. Okay, in the real world of politics and headlines, that's probably quite a lot, and would lead to screaming banner headlines and endless news interviews for days and days and days, despite it being basically a few shady people chatting in dingy offices in Whitehall, which is, of course, the genius of it. Because episode 1 is also a spectacularly clever and complex 29 minutes that tells that simple story as it unfolds in a hilarious and squirm-inducing fashion, and the programme makes quite an astonishing impact right from the outset. Much like the fictional Department of Administrative Affairs in its inspiration, DOSAC, the Department of Social Affairs and Citizenship, in which the series is set, does not exist, but sounds as if it either might or ought to. That the first minister we are introduced to is David Archer from The Archers, even if you might not have recognised him, is just the icing on the souffle, of course, and Timothy Bentinck plays the departing minister, Cliff Lawton, in the first 7 minutes or so of the episode, with a kind of befuddled and muted rage that we will very quickly understand to be totally the norm in these corridors of the powerless. Despite, it is rumoured, being on the brink of giving up acting when he got the part, Peter Capaldi makes an immediate impression in the role, destined to become most associated with the thick of it, as Spinmeister-in-Chief Malcolm Tucker in these scenes which are presumably only there to serve as an instant introduction to his character, as he is not exactly a huge feature of the rest of the episode, despite being a terrifying, looming presence right from the off. The entire series is filmed very much in a cinema verite style, and, we are told, largely improvised around the scripts or vice versa, and yet the panic that the mere mention of Malcolm being in the building induces in the characters is palpable, and you even begin to worry yourself about whether he's sneaking up on you, as a whole host of indecisions suddenly come into play, like whether fruit is the better thing to be seen eating instead of the pastries they actually want, and the simple word coffee becomes a panicky mantra to all and sundry. And words are very, very important in the thick of it, as we are about to discover in the exchange between Malcolm and the soon-to-be ex-minister. After all, when you are employing writers to specifically write the most horrific-sounding X-rated insults possible, you know that something approaching genius is going on behind the scenes. We're not on cosy old BBC One anymore, people. The sitcom boundaries are shattering around us as we watch. Peter Capaldi is, of course, instantly magnificent, with the easygoing veneer of charm already barely hiding the threateningly deadly cobra within. You're immediately terrified of Malcolm, and it's really hard quite to know why, despite the panic which ensued in the office simply because his name has been mentioned. It's an important opening scene, this, because despite the fact that Tim Bentinck is booted out the door fairly rapidly, he will return, although there must have been moments when somebody wished they'd reversed their casting, because it establishes Malcolm, and let's be honest, in the thick of it, it's Malcolm that really matters. It's peculiar going back to watching Peter Capaldi playing Malcolm Tucker, having seen him spending several years being utterly wonderful, vulnerable and breathtakingly good as Doctor Who, of course, because he's immediately so bloody terrifying, charming and affable, and yet, in the best Macbethian tradition, the smile does hide a villain, and his words, however ordinary they might at first appear to be, hide a real underlying menace. From the moment we find Joanna Scanlon's Director of Communications, Terry Coverley, a strangely motherly yet ruthlessly ambitious character, carrying the minister's cases, we can sense Cliff is in real trouble, and whilst shiny new phrases like useless as a marzipan dildo and bum chutney are instantly and effortlessly added to the Oxford English Dictionary, an awkward political scandal is signposted merely by means of the headline spotted on a passing newspaper. Already Cliff's ministerial career is being talked of in the past tense, very tense, and whilst harmless phrases like "the PM likes you personally" are bandied about with new, terrible, deeper meanings, the trap is sprung. Malcolm's simple follow-up phrase, "the thing is," seals his fate, and because Cliff appears weak, he's simply got to go. The lobby have already been told, the resignation letter has already been written, and whilst Cliff shows his true mettle by trying to get Tom at transport fired instead, the furious and surprisingly youthful-looking Malcolm Tucker persuades him to go, citing personal reasons, and whilst the whole jumped or pushed debate rambles on, Cliff is persuaded to ring the PM, and we reach the simple white-on-black title caption. There is, thankfully, no jaunty theme tune to remind us that this is a comedy, and the episode proper can begin. Cliff Lawton's photograph on the office wall now has a companion next to it, which is of his replacement, the Right Honourable Hugh Abbott MP, who we meet a few weeks later, it would seem, as he appears to have been in the post for a while, as he arrives at work, riding on the crest of a wave of vagueness and bewilderment. At this point, we are also introduced to his political advisors, the youthful Ollie Reader and the older but no more wise Glenn Cullen, played by Chris Addison and James Smith. Just for a moment, Hugh tries to act like a competent Minister of the Crown because he feels as if his political star is in the ascendant, and he shows a certain amount of smug-gittery as his latest idea, one which Ollie currently refers to as the Snooper Squad, is liked by the PM. There then follows one of those scenes of almost cringe-inducing embarrassment as these buffoons try very hard to be a group of jocks when we all know that they were exactly the kind of dweebs that were having their heads flushed down the toilets of whatever public schools you can be sure they once suffered in. Now they are in positions of relative power, they begin to act in a way that they think powerful people ought to act in, and it is spectacular spectacularly embarrassing in a way that the sitcom The Office made acceptable. This, we all believe, is how the real people inhabiting the real corridors of power actually behave, or, at the very least, have convinced themselves that it is acceptable to behave. Mindless, blokey banter of the most ghastly, sexist and misogynistic sort, which in the hands of the thick of it is hilarious, in the real world, far less so. Because the PM signalled that they should introduce the scheme, Hugh is mind-snappingly chuffed about it, and between them they decide to, oh Lord, double bubble it, by giving the story to Angela Heaney at the Standard, as played by Lucinda Rakes, who is very understandably an ex-girlfriend of Ollie's, although what she ever saw in him we are left to wonder, especially when massively un-PC observations like "she's easy" are bandied about in the sort of private conversations, you know, those who end up publicly apologising are always having. Trying, for whatever reason, to be part of this stupid boys' club, Terry also tries joining in banter, which is somehow far worse, and whilst they do start to guiltily nod towards the ethical stuff even as Ollie persists with the patronising put-downs, Hugh lets slip that he thinks that his personal driver despises him. Moments later, Hugh and Glenn are in the back of the ministerial car on their way to a school to make the announcement and listening to The World at One, Watto to its chums, and the much-missed voice of Nick Clark. Hugh is still chuffed, even when the fatalities in a train disaster in Bangalore are announced. He manages to make an ill-timed comment, presumably increasing the disdain of his driver, and is positively gleeful at the prospect of putting one over on the boys in the Treasury. Then Malcolm rings, and Malcolm is upset, by which we always mean furious, at what Hugh is planning to announce, and threatens a hurricane of piss, which is nice. And they end up discussing the syntax of this being exactly the sort of thing that the government should be doing, as opposed to actually doing it. Hugh, on his way to make a speech announcing the scheme, is told in no uncertain terms to kill it. And when Malcolm Tucker says kill it, you know exactly what he means. There is a moment of terror inside the car as Hugh realises the magnitude of his gaffe and how he was sucked in by that little word should, because Hugh knows, he just knows that Malcolm is always right. Should didn't mean yes. Meanwhile, Ollie is having lunch with his journalist ex and leaking the very story they now want quashed. Outside Perivale Station, Ace McShane fans take note, the car stops to pick up both Ollie and his doggy bag of olives, and there's another scene of hilarious panic in the back of the car as they try to place the blame beyond themselves and provide a viable explanation in their usual, already too familiar inept manner, and the eyes of the driver, seen in the rearview mirror, notices all. The myth of a leak by a disgruntled civil servant is hatched, though they detect a tone in Terry's voice as they contact her via phone, as Ollie backtracks furiously to his journalist friend, whilst getting ever more carsick. Next we cut him admitting to wanting to have a moment of playing the big man, as he whines and wheedles at her via a mobile phone in a lay-by, although they generally seem to come to the conclusion that they can blame the much unloved Terry. Another rather brilliant scene follows when it dawns upon these three hapless cretins that they've invited the entire press pack out to a school in Wiltshire and now have nothing to tell them. In one of those truly genius scenes of panic and deep insight, we witness Glyn's cynical side as they brainless storm the always popular topic of capital punishment, the National Spare Room Database. Would that idea remained in the realms of comedy. And suddenly, zoos! Because everybody likes zoos. The minister's weary. That's shit, isn't it? Speaks volumes, and once again, this is quietly observed, unremarked upon, in the mirror by the Greek chorus that is Hugh's driver. A nice touch is Hugh using an electric razor in the car as they go along, which tells us much about having to appear on camera and what people perceive when people do in the media age. The less than ingenious solution is to present to the press hounds the notion of an ordinary day at the office for Dosak, showing them a little bit of the everyday coal-face politics which they never report, and their smug gittery at coming up with this, that they had tricked them, for mugs, into coming all the way out to Wiltshire by waving a shiny bit of tinsel at them, gives them a moment of misplaced joy. Their chatter continues when they arrive at the school, and amidst talk of springy concrete and whether references to real families and real people sounds too communist or not, including a brief reminder that fathers are people too, Hugh heads through the double doors to give his speech. Jump cut. He leaves, muttering, "Well, that was a disaster." And the silence in the car as they head back to the office is in stark and hilarious contrast to the confidence of the journey out. Happily, Back at Dosac, they discover that there is no mention at all of the speech in the Evening Standard, and Hugh gets a compliment of sorts, a kind of inverse attaboy, and a half-hearted well done that he got away with it by giving a press conference so boring that nobody could find anything to write about it. And whilst Glenn and Hugh are feeling less than quietly pleased with themselves, and their friendship is delineated with the phrase, "I took the flak, and you supplied the flak jacket," and as they are enjoying a boisterous post-mortem, Malcolm Tucker arrives, wanting a word. Dear Lord, even I'm terrified. And remember, this is episode 1 and we barely know the man yet. Now you begin to appreciate the power and reasoning behind that opening scene. Malcolm, in these particular circles, is God. Malcolm's word is law. Malcolm is the devil incarnate. Malcolm is, well, Malcolm. Whilst he's casually riffing on Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire," we discover that the PM is on a plane in Stockholm thinking that the Treasury are trying to stiff him one, and as a diversion decided to stick with Hugh's story, and in a battle of the shoulds, don't should me, that Hugh swiftly loses when he unwisely believes he momentarily has the upper hand, the PM is suddenly backing what is currently being referred to as Hugh's snooper force, and despite that slight moment of triumph, he now has to completely reverse his position, and it turns out the announcement Hugh didn't make, he actually did. Politics, eh? It's rather like one of those psychological experiments in that an entire room full of people are so very persuasive about an obvious falsehood that you begin to doubt yourself and you start agreeing with them. Malcolm tries to get inside Hugh's head, telling him just to say that he said it, and with a little fable about someone he knows who had a dalliance but was able to switch a switch in his head and return to his other life, Hugh is convinced into dark psychopathic arts. Where are my people? Bleats Hugh to an almost empty office. His people have gone home at the end of their working days, so he's left to explain that things have changed and that he did announce what he didn't announce to Terry, Glenn and Ollie, to which the obvious and unavoidable response in the world of the thick of it is, whiff. And, of course, Hugh has to turn to Malcolm for help, which involves them all getting on the phones. Ollie's journalist friend Angela is back, having had a pretty awful day at the office herself, again with startlingly sharp insight into the cruel and misogynistic world of journalism, surely worth an entire series of its own. Someone actually went out and bought her a pair of flip-flops, which are a somewhat unfortunately named type of British footwear, which were presented to her with a porn picture stuck to them and the message, "Angela Heaney swallows anything." She is, quite understandably, furious. Why not, she asks Ollie, not tell the story he's now feeding her, but instead tell the story of this day of spin which he has unique insight into. As Ollie flusters, Malcolm steps in telling her what a good idea he thinks that is and makes a swift exit. Only then he comes back. Only he knows exactly why she shouldn't do that, because, as he so affably puts it, she'd be dead. Professionally, we think. Professionally, we hope. And as Malcolm explains in explicit detail about how dead this poor woman is going to be, professionally we almost believe, we do genuinely believe that he is capable of doing this, and Malcolm in full flow is a truly magnificently terrifying sight. At least Ollie has the apparent decency to do some squirming, even if, being Ollie, it's particularly self-serving squirming. And so we find the minister on the radio, live on air, talking about what is now being called the Sponge Avengers in a way that's obviously never going to come back and bite him in the backside at all. And outside, waiting in the ministerial car, Hugh's driver listens to radio, hearing everything and not rolling a single eyeball. And as the episode ends, with silent captions interspersing with the final scene, Hugh Abbott, Ollie and Glenn are in the stairwell, finally ending yet another rubbish day at the ministry. Ollie has promised a lifestyle piece on Hugh's home life to Angela, which already has him moaning, and as they reflect upon what is already becoming known as Flip-Flop Friday, Hugh whispers that he really needs Glenn to get him a new driver, and yet, as he accuses the driver of the heinous crime of smiling and smirking inappropriately, he gets into the car, capitulating with the cheery, false bonhomie of "You're the boss," as the episode ends. The utter Sometimes, when reflecting upon the thick of it, I do forget just how good it is, actually. As I mentioned at the start, nothing much happens, but an awful lot happens, and the way the jigsaw is put together is breathtaking to watch, and even those foul-mouthed flights of fancy do have the touch of genius about them, you have to admit. And with all comedy based upon other people being fundamentally embarrassing, those 29 minutes have flown by, and yet somehow you're desperate for the ordeal to be over, and the gaffs just to stop, but equally you'd quite like for it to go on and on and on. There is, of course, a huge elephant in the room when discussing the early episodes of The Thick of It, namely Chris Langham, playing incoming minister with a comfortably numb Pink Floydian laid-back incompetence and bubbling undercurrent of abject fear, using the inept persona that also served him so well in the almost unlikely to be seen ever again spoof documentary series People Like Us. This, thank your lucky stars, Griff Rhys-Jones, not quite the Not the 9 o'clock news fourth player, has had a troubled decade since his appearances in The Thick of It, and his sudden necessary departure, which is beyond our remit here but cannot be ignored. However, I might want to suggest to you at this point that it is sometimes possible to separate the artist from the art. Does a great painting diminish in greatness because of who painted it? Does a fabulous song become less fabulous because of who performed it? Does a wonderful movie become less wonderful because of somebody being in it? Does a sitcom become less funny because of one of the actors playing in it? To some viewers or listeners, the answer is quite obviously a firm yes, and that's fine. I can respect that, despite the fact that I sometimes find myself idly humming certain tunes that can never be played on the radio ever again. But the early series of The Thick of It do deserve re-seeing, because despite all of that, they do have the whiff of greatness about them. Obviously, there are going to be associations, and certain television shows are unlikely ever to see the light of day again because of what somebody involved with the programme turned out to have done, and that's absolutely quite right too. After all, nobody wants to be randomly reminded of a heinous act simply because they switch on their television, but the issue remains extraordinarily complicated, and probably far more complicated than I can go into here, and God help us if anyone closely associated with a much-loved television favourite that is constantly being rerun turns out to have been a wrong un. I choose to rewatch the early series of The Thick of It, not because I condone the actions of one of its star players, but because it's interesting to watch, and actually a bloody good half an hour of television that doesn't get seen half as much as it might once have done, for pretty obvious reasons, I suppose. The Thick of It would get far sharper later on, and would lead to the spin-off feature film In the Loop, and ultimately the American hit comedy Veep. Meanwhile, out of necessity, its own focus would shift due to the unavailability of that one rather significant central character, and as it became more successful and acquired a more significant budget, the cast of characters grew and grew, and introduced such fine actors as the sublime Roger Allam and the delightfully sharp Rebecca Front to orbit around the machinations of Malcolm Tucker throughout the subsequent 7 years or so. Meanwhile, the perpetual survivors that are the characters of Glenn and Ollie, one of life's more odious double acts, as well as Terry, will squirm and toady their way into complete and fully rounded figures with lives and backgrounds and genuine concerns and worries. Occasionally you might feel some sympathy for any or all of them, but then they do something so crass and selfish and you find yourself loathing them all over again, which is magnificent.
Thank you to Martin for another lovely article.
Next up, it's Paul Chandler looking at...
Well, let's see, shall we?
one of his favourite series, I think.
He used to give me roses. I wish he could again. But that was on the outside, and things were different then. On the inside, the sun still shines, and the rain falls down. But the sun and rain are prisoners too.
Hiya, Hanson, how you going?
Comes back.
Hello listeners, it's me, Paul the Shy Yeti, from the Shy Life podcast, here on Round the Archives to do well, you know, I usually have Nick here with me, but not today. It's just me. I'm going to be talking about a show that's up there as one of my very, very favourite shows. I hesitate to call it a soap opera. I know it gets called a soap opera, and in many ways it has soap opera elements. But for me, probably if you're going to call this show a soap opera, then you should also call Doctor Who a soap opera, because these days there's probably as much soapy element in Doctor Who as there is in the show I'm going to be discussing. What show is that, Paul? Tell us! Well, I've probably given it away because you'll have heard the theme music. I'm going to be talking about Prisoner, or as we call it over here, Prisoner Cell Block H.
Why don't you ask that new social worker to arrange it? Because Mr. Reed used to do that for us.
What Kay reckons, I might as well wrangle a holiday on Surface Paradise.
Now, I do have facts and figures for you, and I'll come to those in a bit. But I think I should probably tell you how I first came to discover the show. Now, it's one of those cases, and it's happened to me before, not just with TV shows, but also with bands I like, with musical groups. where you hear from people, oh, that band's awful, or well, that singer's no good at all. So if you respect the person who's speaking, you don't bother. You don't bother to check out that band until one day you speak to someone who says, oh no, that band's amazing. And they play you a song and you think, wow, this is like the best band ever. Well, a similar sort of thing happened to me with Prisoner Cell Block H. For years I had been guilty of believing that Prisoner was a load of old rubbish. I heard about bad acting and wobbly sets, which, of course, had I thought about it, there's plenty of bad acting and wobbly sets on Doctor Who, and I was already a big fan of that.
What do we do like I suggested? Be sure to change the way she sees things.
I think I'd probably got into Prisoner before I got into Dark Shadows. And in Dark Shadows' case, by the time that I got into Dark Shadows, wobbly acting and wobbly sets was a major plus point for me. But the honest truth of Prisoner is that the acting is no better or worse than the acting on Coronation Street from that time, or most TV shows. There are very few wobbly sets, so if you're tuning in to watch Prisoner for bad acting and wobbly sets, then, well, if you're a fan of most TV of the 70s and 80s, I wouldn't be throwing any stones. Some of my very favourite actors come from Prisoner. But anyway, I was going to tell you about how I first discovered the show. I literally, I never sat down to even watch an episode, but I think I was flicking over the channels. It would have been quite late, and this was when I was still at school, and I lived in the TVS region in Salisbury, and Prisoner Cell Block H was always one of those shows that was, if you went to a different ITV region, it would be showing a completely different era of the show. And in fact, by the early 90s, that was a thrill for me, because a bit like when I first got into Doctor Who, where it was hard to get hold of the stories, the same was true of Prisoner. It wasn't on video or DVD as it is today. It wasn't very accessible. If I had friends who lived in different TV regions, I would often say, can you do me a tape of some Prisoner? Or if I'd be visiting them, I'd say, do you mind if I stay up late and just watch Prisoner before I go to bed? And some people don't like spoilers. To me, to be able to see episodes of Prisoner that were a few years ahead, or, a few months ahead, or different characters, that was amazing. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. So for me, I was flicking the channels, and I landed on ITV, TVS, whatever you want to call it, and there was a siege going on. There was police, there was somebody being held hostage. I literally did not know what I was watching, but it was extremely exciting. And so I watched, and then there was a massive cliffhanger, and then suddenly the Prisoner theme.
I'm going to need you in a minute. What for? You're going to start a punch-up. Something to keep the screws occupied. What are you going to be doing? Don't ask questions. I'm entitled. You're entitled to nothing. But you won't like what you get if you don't do as I tell you. Okay. Only asking. You give me the nod. Yeah. Just keep your eyes open. Well, go on, get going.
There was a point when Prisoner got very popular over here, the theme tune got released as a single, and it didn't top the charts, but it was in the top 10. And ironically, by the time Prisoner became really big over here, I think it had finished in Australia. Probably these days, the popularity of the show would probably have kept them making it. I mean, Neighbours is still made 35 years after it first appeared, and it's pretty much made because there is an audience in the UK, much more than there is in Australia. So by the time Prisoner was big over here, it had quite recently finished in Australia. So I was watching this episode with the siege, and it ended with the Prisoner music, and then suddenly it clicked. Oh my goodness, that was really good. I really enjoyed that. But that's Prisoner Cell Block H. That's the programme that people have told me is rubbish. And that is like the most exciting thing I've seen on television ever, probably. And so I kept watching. A lot of the famous characters, like B. Smith and Lizzie Birdsworth and Doreen and Jude. I may return to some of these characters, but it is going to be difficult. It is going to be difficult to cover the series in any great detail, as it ran for so many episodes. But I think it's probably best if I'm just very enthusiastic about the whole show. So where was I? Yes. So I started watching at a point where a character called Vinegar Tits, who was, in the early episodes, Vinegar Tits was the kind of typical bad warder. There were a number of bad warders in Prisoner Cell Block H. The most famous of them was Joan the Freak Ferguson. Vinegar Tits was never in her league, but She was a lady who had lived with her mother into middle age and had never really sort of had boyfriends and was kind of resentful and took that out on the prisoners. The freak, she was a bit more hardcore. Although in the run of the show you did see a soft side to her. That was the good thing about Prisoner. There were goodies, there were baddies, and sometimes you found yourself siding with the baddies. There would be times when Joan, the freak, when there were people who were even worse than her, and you wanted her to win. Very much an anti-hero, along the same lines as someone like Barnabas Collins in Dark Shadows, although the freak didn't tend to suck blood quite as often, at least not in the episodes I saw. So yes, so I kept watching Prisoner. I later found out that I was watching the sort of exit plotline of Vera Bennett, otherwise known as Vinegar Tits, and I kept watching. So around the time that I started watching, there were all sorts of twists, and one of those inmates turned out to be not half the person that you thought she was. And of course, this is one of the things that I love about Prisoner. I absolutely adore a cliffhanger, which is why I love Doctor Who, which is why I love Dark Shadows, which is why I do love soap operas, particularly Australian ones. Sons and Daughters. Oh, there are so many Australian soaps that I love, particularly 70s and 80s ones. And I'm sure I will at some stage do an article on Sons and Daughters, because along with Prisoner, that's another of my all-time favourite shows.
I've always tried to do what's best for everybody.
You really believe that, don't you? I thought you were a conniving bitch. But you're even worse. You're a bit round the twist.
There's nothing quite like an Australian soap, even though I'm saying that Prisoner isn't quite the soap in your Neighbours or Home and Away sort of template. Aussie soaps are they're quite different. They're often quite middle class in a way that UK soaps are usually more working class, and American soaps often seem to be upper class. Sons and Daughters has a more well-off family, but then a more working-class family, and it's the story of those sort of two lifestyles clashing, but I won't talk about Sons and Daughters this time. Anyway, going back to my history with Prisoner, so I followed the show for many years, and when I first went to university in 92, Central TV had already finished screening the show, and in fact it was Central that I think was probably where a lot of the main fandom of Prisoner came from in the UK. Central sort of got to the stage where I think they were showing it every night, and when I got to university up there, they were actually starting to show it again for a second time. Now, I think they only did that for about 6 months. I had very poor TV reception when I first went to Birmingham. But, that was another thrill, because I'd never seen these really early episodes. And of course, we were still a number of years away from the series coming out, firstly on video, but only a smattering of episodes, and then later on DVD. The only problem that we had in the TVS region was that about a year from the show finishing, Prisoner stopped being shown on ITV and started being shown on Channel 5 right from the beginning, which, had I even had Channel 5, that would have been annoying to suddenly go back to the start just as you're nearing the end. But the other problem was certain areas of Salisbury didn't have Channel 5, and Camberley, where I was living, well, I had no reception anyway. So that was all rather frustrating. Of course, in the end, my good friend Nick Goodman, who I usually do my articles with, he saved the day and recorded the last year or so for me, because he was just in an area where Channel 5 was available to him. I don't know about neighbours becoming good friends, but my friend certainly saved my bacon when it came to recording TV shows that I couldn't otherwise access. With Lisa and Andy recording Dark Shadows for me, and Nick saving the day with Prisoner. But of course, eventually the whole series came out on DVD, and I was finally able to watch the show from beginning to end. Which reminds me of a very happy afternoon when I was watching some of those tapes that Nick recorded for me, and I think I decided that I was going to watch the last 4 or 5 episodes in one long sitting. And I think I felt that by this point, oh gosh, we're probably talking, I've been watching, it was probably the late 90s or something, maybe even later than that, because by the time that Channel 5 had got back to the end of the show, yes, I imagine it could well have been in the noughties. But anyway, so I sat down to watch those last episodes, and I think I thought, well, I ought to see the show off with a tipple of some sort. And I think all I had was some brandy, perhaps from Christmas. So I decided brandy coffee it is then. And, well, all I can say is that by the time I got to that final episode, as the freak got her comeuppance, spoilers, as the freak got her comeuppance, I was shouting at the screen, relishing every last minute of it. So, lots of happy memories from watching the show.
I accuse you of getting rid of B. Smith.
No. You had me batched.
How do you plead?
No.
Forced me to make grog. Guilty or not guilty?
No.
You set me up for a bashing.
I probably want some facts and figures. So Prisoner, otherwise known as Prisoner Cell Block H in the UK, or Caged Women if you live in Canada. Wikipedia calls it a soap opera, set in the fictional women's prison of Wentworth Detention Centre, which is located in the fictitious Melbourne suburb of Wentworth. The series was created by Reg Watson and produced by the Reg Grundy organisation. There were 692 episodes, which were broadcast between the 27th of February 1979 and the 11th of December 1986. Grundy was making a number of other shows in that period. Young Doctors was still around, and that ended about 82. Sons and Daughters started in 82 and finished in 87. So, and of course Neighbours started in about 85. So a lot of these shows overlapped and were all made by the same TV company. Originally, Prisoner was only supposed to be a 16-part standalone series, which explains why some of the original cast are written out within the first 6 months or so, because as the show was being broadcast and was getting more popular and they decided to keep it running, some of the actors who had signed on originally for the 16-part series didn't want to feel committed to a much more longer running series. And whilst many of the original cast stayed on, there were a handful who also sort of left quite quickly.
Well, it's about time, Birdbrain. Where's the dirty linen? We can't wash thin air, you know.
I'm a bit late because I had other things to do.
You've got something else to do too, Mackenzie. Come with me.
Where are we going? Hey, listen, if it's going to see the governor, I want to know what it's all about.
It's not the governor, Mackenzie. It's Smith.
Smith? Hey, now, hold on. What do I want to go and visit a loony for? What does she want, anyhow?
The best way to find that out is to ask her.
Now, Prisoner was definitely the first sort of series in this women in prison template that I was interested in. But, of course, before this, there was the British show Within These Walls in the 70s. And, of course, since Prisoner, there have been series such as Bad Girls, Orange is the New Black, Wentworth, which in itself is a sort of remake of Prisoner. Yeah, you probably have to call it a remake because there are characters in it with the same names as the names of characters in the original Prisoner. So, yeah, it's not a continuation, it's definitely a remake. I own Within These Walls, and I've watched a few episodes. I watched all of Bad Girls. That is a really fun show. Orange is the New Black is another show I really like. Bizarrely, Wentworth is one where I wouldn't say I haven't clicked with it, but I think perhaps because it is sort of the new Who to classic Who. Perhaps I'm a little bit more wary of it. I will get round to watching more of it. I've got 2 or 3 of the seasons. There's also a new series called Clink, which is also set in a women's prison, and that's very recent. I don't know what it is, but I'm absolutely not interested at all in men in prison shows. Women in prison is somehow, I don't know, it's just more me. I think the type of stories you get when women are in prison is just more varied. But, I don't know. So what about favourite characters? Well, B. Smith, who is the top dog, for the sort of first half of the series, she's a very strong character. And
The great Queen Bee. Getting ready to meet your maker, eh, Smith?
That's enough, Mackenzie. You can see how ill she is.
in fact, in those early days of the show, you've got Bee and Lizzie and Doreen, who are later joined by another character called Jude. There are plenty of characters who are sort of, if not in the show from beginning to end, they're in it for 2, 3, 4 years. I think maybe one of the problems towards the end of the show is that characters come and go far too quickly. And some of the really popular characters have long since gone, and then it's quite difficult to replace them without replacing them with sort of carbon copies. You do find that some of the plot lines do get repeated. I mean, these shows weren't made with DVDs in mind, with fans sitting there going, well, they did that plot 3 years ago. Well, you know, these things are going to happen. One of my favourites, of course, is Lizzie Bursworth, who is the sort of gossipy character, the old gossip. There's a lot of comedy in Prisoner alongside all the dramatics, and of course the only character who is there from beginning to end, I mentioned some of the bad warders, but Senior Officer Meg Jackson, later Meg Morris, is a character who is there in episode 1 and also still around by the last episode. She's one of the most sympathetic characters. Of course, you've got other characters like Erica Davidson, who is the governor of the prison. There were 2 governors in the run of the show. Erica Davidson is governor for about pretty much halfway through the series. Then we get a new governor, Anne Reynolds, as I say, from about halfway through. Now, although it would have been tempting to have picked a particular episode, I think I should probably just think of some of the episodes that I was particularly keen on. Anything with a psychopath was always good. Or maybe a cult. At one stage in the series, you had a halfway house, which was a home for people who'd left the prison. That's, of course, one of the things about Prisoner, is that although there are lots of scenes in prison, there are also lots of scenes set outside of prisons, whether it be seeing how the various different women end up in jail, maybe seeing them coming out of jail or escaping from the prison and then trying to survive. Occasionally, I can think of occurrences where people were being transferred from one prison to another, and maybe there was a car crash and characters escaped. But as I say, the halfway house was a good plot line for having sort of people turn up seeking shelter, and sometimes they could be trusted, sometimes they brought their own storylines with them or got involved in cults. One of the most heartbreaking plot lines involved a character who, at the stage of this plot line, had been an inmate and had been with the show quite a long time, but she got sick, she got cancer, and she was suffering a lot of pain, and she wasn't going to get any better. One of the characters, Jude, who, although she started off her days in prison, she was also known for running the halfway house. She helped this character die, and I can still remember to this day how shocking it was when I first saw this, and I was perhaps only 15 or 16, and the character went blind, and it was really quite harrowing. And she was helped to the end of her life by Jude, who of course was then arrested and put back in jail for murder, when it wasn't murder at all, it was anything but. So there are lots of sort of hard-hitting storylines in there. Among the craziness, what else? There were a number of fires. Of course, there were lots of riots, but there was really good fires, with sort of end-of-season cliffhangers where had people died or not died, all manner of twists and turns, especially by the time the freak arrived. She was full of nasty little plans. One of the most memorable plots was from sort of later on in the series, where there was the wife of a gangland boss who was being held in the prison, and rather than her escaping, some gunmen came in to try and sort of free her, and ended up with a hostage situation and some really sort of key characters being, not surviving to the end of the episode, let's say. I could probably think of hundreds of different episodes that I like for one reason or another, but the one that really stuck with me the most, in that I have kind of done this same thing in both my Sutton Park series that Lisa and Andrew were involved in, but also in some of my writing and even in my podcast, was a plot involving a sinister doctor who hypnotised inmates to kill people. Of course, they would do it but not remember they'd done it. And the idea of somebody being hypnotised to become a murderer, it still excites me to this day, and it certainly excited me a lot back in the early 90s when I first saw those episodes, so much so that, as I say, I did my own plot line in my own show involving just the same sort of scenario. I suppose I'd better finish now.
Cut it out, Lou. If you're going to do it, do it!
I could really talk about Prisoner for hours and hours and hours, but we haven't got time. It is very difficult to talk about a series that ran for so many years, but I hope I can share with you my enthusiasm for the show and tell you a bit about sort of my history with the programme and how I came to love it. And it's just such a fun show. And I think the only reason I am wary to call it a soap opera is that I know that there are a lot of snobs out there who, if the word soap comes up, that's a negative thing. And, of course, to me, that's never been a negative thing. A lot of people I know don't like shows that have that many episodes. To me, gosh, a show with 696 episodes, that's going to keep me busy for, at least a weekend. I don't know. Is Bad Girls a soap opera? Is Orange is the New Black a soap opera? I don't think you'd call those shows soap operas. You call them drama programmes. And Prisoner is a drama programme. Sure, there are characters who get romantically involved, but you get characters who are romantically involved in episodes of The Sweeney, for goodness sake. In pretty much any programme, there are people who are going to fall in love and have relationships, but you don't call them soap operas. So I think that Prisoner is just a drama show, and a very good one at that. So, Andrew and Lisa, that's all I'm going to say for now. If you'd like me to pick a particular episode and review that, I know that Mr. Goodman will happily sit down with me and review an episode with me, because that's one of the things I forgot to mention. When he recorded Prisoner for me back in the late 90s, he and Ali, his wife, although they weren't married at the time, but he and Ali, they got addicted to Prisoner as well, and they started off recording it for me and ended up avidly watching it themselves. So yes, it's very easy once you start to watch a few episodes to find yourself totally hooked on it. And there are plenty of episodes on YouTube if you want to try out some. Watch some of the best bits clips or something. Yes, should still be available to buy as well if you want to do it that way. But so yes, Prisoner Cell Block H, one of my absolute favourites. Check it out if you haven't. Well, I think that's it for me now. I better get out of here or they'll have me in solitary. Goodbye now. Bye bye.
Sharing all the love with more, till I had to face the nightmare of waking up alone. On the inside, the roses grow. They don't mind the stony ground, but the roses here are prisoners too. When morning comes around.
Many thanks to Paul for doing that.
Yes.
I know he likes that.
He does like it a lot. Yes, I think I might have recorded some for him for that. But
yes. Now Warren joins us, and although we've done a video and a written tribute to Paul Darrow, we just wanted to talk about him.
We did
a bit as well. So here's us chatting about Paul Darrow. So Paul Darrow,
yes, the wonderful Paul Darrow.
Yes. What do you think of when I say Paul Darrow?
I think of him. We went to a convention once, and we were in the room, and he was being interviewed with David Maloney, I think, and somebody came in late.
Yeah,
and he sort of stopped and said, "What time do you call this? How dare you come in late to my panel?" And he was only joking, but it was very funny.
But Warren, you wrote us a lovely piece, and you said you identified a lot with. Well, was it Paul Darrow or was it Avon?
It was Avon, but it was the way Paul played it. And this was the thing. He was having such a good time being really sarcastic to people. And as you know, my wit is rather dry, positively parched. Mm-hmm. And I can be a bit sarcastic sometimes. And that all comes from Avon's character.
Yeah.
7, when Blake 7 was first transmitted. And you're picking up your character traits as you grow up. And that was the greatest thing. He's having a lot of fun being really cheeky and rude to people. Yes. I'm not. I don't mean it in a rude way. When I'm a bit how shall we say, sarcastic.
Sharp. A little bit sharp.
Yeah, my wits can be a little bit sharp sometimes, and it's not meant in a malicious way, as Avon's was. But I could see where he was going with the character, and I found that quite fun. And it had such a impact on me because that's how my one of my traits, perhaps, as my character has developed, has always remained there, and that's thanks to Paul Darrow.
But Lisa, you recently we put his autobiography on in the car when we were.
Yes. I bought the audiobook version of his autobiography, which he reads himself from Big Finish, and we listened to it. Yeah, and it's great. He was great storyteller.
Well, what are some of his stories? Because I don't think everybody will know sort of when he was sort of growing up. Because wasn't he in the cadets?
Yes, he was. He went to Haberdasher's Ask private school, but he got a scholarship because he was quite bright. And then he was in the army cadets. And in sort of when he was about 15 or 16, they did some sort of exercise. And they weren't expected to win because they had other ones that were considered to be officer material. But basically, they sneaked up on them and sort of tied them up.
Warmington-on-Sea style.
Yeah. But the teacher said they cheated and wouldn't let them have the win.
Oh, that's just sour
but,
grapes.
you know, that's the way armies don't announce their presence.
Hello, we're here.
And there's a lovely story as well.
That's your unit, of course.
That's your unit, yes. And then you have the theme. He was in a stage version of Alfie.
Oh, right.
And
never knew that.
he was on stage and he noticed that there was a little old lady in the first or second row, and she was sort of, I don't know if she was nodding along, but it got to that he ended up stopping the play and talking to her for about 5 minutes.
Oh, bless his heart.
And she told him that she'd just recently lost her husband and that her friends had brought her there to cheer her up. And then she realised that she was holding the play up. And she said, oh, I'm terribly sorry, I'm spoiling everybody's night. And he said, no, on the contrary, I think you've just made it. And she got a round of applause, and then they carried on.
Oh.
So he was a very nice man, you know, he always had time for people.
Did he tell the story in his rich tone?
Yes,
his voice is amazing.
It's wonderful to listen to it. It's highly recommended because because I've got the Big Finish Player app on my phone, so if you buy a CD you get a download.
Okay.
So you can listen to it on the go.
His voice sounds so rich and diverse.
You can, sitting on the bus listening to Paul Darrow telling me stuff that I didn't necessarily know. So, but yeah, he lived a great life, and he lived every moment of it to the full.
Yeah,
which is all we can do. I think
exactly, because we only get one shot at it.
Yes, and I noticed as well because we're watching Blake 7, and in every episode he'll do a little thing that makes you smile.
A little bit of darrowing.
Yeah, it's the way you sort of. There's one where he runs round a corner. It's the way he sort of skids round the corner. It's just. You know.
And also he's playing the negative anti-hero.
Yes.
So it's a very difficult part to play.
It is.
And be engaged with your audience. And he becomes bigger than Blake.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether that was an impact that had on perhaps Gareth deciding to step down.
Mm-hmm.
Because he becomes even bigger once Blake goes.
Yes. Yeah.
Even to the point of the last episode, isn't he? He is the focus.
He's the last man standing.
Yeah, he is the last man standing.
Well, can I ask you about that, Warren? Because you said you remember watching, early Blake 7. How did the loss of Blake? How did that affect you as a viewer? Avon being sort of pushed to the fore. Did you think it was a logical progression of the series? Did it feel right? Did it feel wrong?
I actually was. This is no disrespect to Gareth, because I think he's an admirable actor. I really preferred Paul, and I always saw Paul as the lead because he had a more powerful. I don't know whether it was Terry Nation's writing of an egocentric character such as Avon against a mild-mannered person fighting against a system that's trodden him down and wronged him. I.e. the Blake character being almost eclipsed by this egomaniac of Avon, who's not wishing to back down, who will question everything that's put to the group and say, is this what you really want from their leader? And I thought it was a natural progression that Avon would just take over, and then he does, doesn't he? That last season he's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. He's almost to the point where he's coming to a fall, and it is that last man standing. But the lights go down, we fade to black, we hear the shots. Now we don't know. It's left very open-ended how it will end, and you've got the Big Finish carry-ons from there. But it was in. And you can see the egocentric coming out, the ultimate, I'm indestructible, surrounded by all these. It's almost the Mavic Chen moment, isn't it? Being exterminated by the Darks. You can't destroy me. Yeah. So yeah, the bit where he takes over and Blake comes out the series, I saw as a natural progression.
But I think it's true that we never really saw Paul Darrow himself, did we?
No.
We always saw him playing.
You saw Paul Darrow, the actor.
Yeah. A character even at a convention appearance or something.
You didn't see Paul Birkby?
No. But
which is his real name, obviously. Yeah.
But just every now and then there's a bit of footage where you do get a glimpse of it, I think. Because we did his Who Done It.
Yes.
Didn't we?
Yes.
Where he is doing the sort of question and answer thing at the end, and it's not the Paul Darrow you expect to see. I think that's true. And even in the sort of there's some outtakes of him doing sort of continuity for UK Gold or whatever, where you can actually see him sort of talking to the director, and suddenly that's not Avon, that's Paul Darrow you're seeing.
Very quiet. And we were just saying this, weren't we?
Yes.
Actors are very quiet people. They have no character role to go into. And we were discussing the fact that I pitched in that they have so many characters they've played throughout their career, how they can lose themselves and lose being themselves. And that's why I think when we see people on the street, or say we're in a restaurant or in a queue, it's the case where I was with Peter Davison in Tesco's. He had an argument with the self-scan checkout. You see the person then, and that is not the convention person, and that is not the actor character they are actually playing. And that's quite interesting. But as you say, from those outtakes, Paul is very quiet, he's very measured, but he also likes to have a little fun.
Yeah.
And it's subtle fun, isn't it?
But he's concerned to do it right as well. I think that's what came over to me.
Yeah.
That, are you happy with what I've done?
Yeah.
You know, do you want me to do it again? Because I will. You know.
Yeah.
Till we, I'll do it till we get it right to your satisfaction.
Yeah.
It's not a thing of I've done it. That's what you're getting.
Yeah. Even for just a small thing like that, he wants to get it right.
You know, I'll do it 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Yeah. Until everybody's happy.
I should just point out the Big Finish ones are slotted in the seasons.
Are they?
They're not on afterwards.
Well, I showed my ignorance. I thought there was one at the end. Sorry.
No, because they've got Gareth Thomas in some of them, and some of them are set before he leaves, and then some of them are set after he leaves. And they are now thinking about what they're going to do with the range, whether they're going to carry on with it or not, because they've got some stuff recorded with Paul.
But do you know what I want to watch again? His adventure game.
Yes, if we ever find it.
That will be an interesting one to go back to now, because he's got a beard on in there, hasn't he?
Yeah, I like him with a beard.
Didn't he have a... Do you?
Yeah.
You like something to grab hold
of?
Oh,
yes. You were saying?
Wonderful. I was going to say, I think we'd probably see a bit of real Paul Darrow in that as well, don't you? Because he's faced with solving these puzzles and things like that, and there's no time for any sort of persona or anything like that.
Didn't we sit and watch that one?
We did.
But
he was very quiet, but he was logical, wasn't he?
I think that's the next thing I'd like to see sort of Paul in, if we can find it again.
Yes.
But,
it's here in the house.
It's in the house, like most things are.
In the house.
In the house, yes.
But I mean, lovely memories of Paul Darrow.
Yes.
I'm just sad we never really saw him enough.
Yes.
Not in real life. That's the thing.
I'm very sad. I've never met him at all. But it's another one you can chart with your growing up, can't you?
But Warren, as you said, you wrote us a lovely piece. So have a look on our blog spot, and we did do a little tribute video based around Who Done It.
Yeah.
And of course, we're still going through Blake 7.
Yes, and enjoying it tremendously.
As we speak, we're on season 2 now.
Yes.
So there's lots more talking about Paul Darrow to come from us.
Yes, there is. So lots more to watch.
There you go.
Yes.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you to Warren for joining us on the sofa on one of the hottest days of the year.
And he'll be back later.
He will.
But now, although Paul did his piece on his own...
He did.
Nick's not on his own.
He's not.
As he's joined by his writing partner of long standing, Jo Bunsell, as they look at
Johnny Jarvis.
And it's hello to Round the Archives. This is Nick Goodman here again, reporting in, and I'm joined this this week, this time round with a new voice to your folks, but an old voice that I've known for many a year. We've been friends for nearly 40 years now this year, and we've written a couple of series together and loads of stuff, and we've just finished 2 books with the Magnus Editor and Life After. I'd like to introduce you to Jo Bunsell.
Hello.
Hello.
This is me talking.
Yes. And this time we're going to talk about 2 series we know and like very much. One of which is Johnny Jarvis, which was out on DVD last year. That's the wife, by the way. Ali. Hello, Ali.
Hello, this is the wife.
The orange
job centre's sign looked like that when I was looking for a job 2 years later. Well, no, 2 years later, because I left in '85. And the boards, you had those boards with the
labour exchange.
The labour exchange. My dad always used to talk about signing on at the labour.
And they're always crap.
Yes. But I always found with those job things, because I was 17, just coming on 18. I'd just come out of YTS, and they either wanted total school leavers, which I was too old for, or over 18s, which I was just too young for.
Hey,
and you've not only got racism tackling, you've got bullying as well. You know, racial bullying.
And so Jamie
Foreman, who rent-a-bully. He was
Good
basically he was in King of the Castle as the warrior and the bully.
Also, I suspect he's also got on well with Gary Shell.
Yes, they're very much the same age, same era, and probably the same background.
And I think they support the same team. Because isn't Gary Shell a Spurs supporter?
I think so.
Because he certainly was when he's in Metal Mickey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I know Jamie Foreman's a Spurs supporter, as I am myself.
Yeah. As Jamie Foreman went on to do Doctor Who in the Tennant years.
Yes, he did, yeah.
Yes, in Idiot's Lantern.
Yeah, that's right, and he's probably paralytic of Spurs making it to the Champions League final, which I mentioned. Oh, Ian Jory, fantastic stuff. That is the basic soundtrack for this era.
Yeah.
There are many people who talk about other things. Ian Jury
was 78, 79 era Ian Jury.
Yeah. Now, some old guitar nerd down the pub, Eric Hart, actually does remember, because he used to work in London as a graphic artist in the this period.
Yeah.
Pretty come to Salisbury, now back here. But he remembers it's the Eagle pub in Camden that he used to go and watch Ian Jury at lunchtimes.
Oh, wow.
And he said it was brilliant, because he used to pop in there for a few beers, and Ian Jury, they used to invite people out the crowd. They had an instrument. Oh, come on in. Oh, you know, it's him. Here we go. Come on in, have a sing-song. Yes, it was amazing.
You've got the 3 of them there. This is Johnny Jarvis and the Lipton, played by Ian Shears, who was in K9 and Company, and the lovely Joanna Hargreaves, who plays the punk. I was at college with the punk, so there was a sort of connection there. Although she did spawn the immortal line, if Nick had a Mohican, I'd probably fancy him. I was tempted.
Tanked up with polo neck.
Yeah. It's a good portrayal. As you say, it was only sort of 5 years away. I just had to dial back 5 years. And
yeah, that's why I like this. It really does play very well of it's a limited history it goes through, but it smells and tastes of 78.
I must moving to Harnham and the garish wallpaper that was still there when you remember.
Yes, indeed.
We only met, as I say,
and the clocks on the wall that have those fancy surrounds.
Yeah, and the episode we're watching is set in 1978 to 79. And of course, Joe and I met in '79, so this is very much the '70s we remember. Johnny Jarvis is played by the late Mark Farmer, who sadly died a couple of years ago, only in his 50s.
It's a real pity that the people from this didn't go on to sort of stellar careers. They were absolutely marvellous actors. I mean, obviously John Barton.
Oh yeah, he went into the mum, Lipton's mum. The character of Lipton. I can't remember her name, but she was somebody's mum in Emmerdale. She went on to be a rent-a-mum.
Yes, the thing that I always kind of most admired of this is basically that Morris Colburn turns up and is basically doing a supporting role.
Yeah.
When he was actually quite a big name at this time.
He was, yes. The Return of the Saints. Yeah. Long before Lytton, Return of the Saints, he was the main baddie. He was guest star.
He's a big name, and it just goes to prove what a good bloke he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's true that there's no such thing as small parts, only small actors.
Yes, I mean...
he obviously recognised this is a good part, I'm going to do this.
Absolutely, and that's what it's all about.
And it's good because he's a proper presence when he turns up.
Yes.
You don't forget him all the way through the series.
Right.
He's still there as a threat, even though he's actually not in that many scenes.
And at this point he'd done Gangsters.
Yes,
and
indeed,
pretty well that was the only series he got. And of course in the last 4 years of his life he did Howard's Way, which was a series that...
put Burston on the map.
Yes, it was never
not that ever needed to be.
Never quite as edgy as Morris Colburn actually deserved. I think it would have been Johnny Jarvis. Basically, it's the story of two lads who become friends. One's a nerdy bookie one, and the other is
Lipton's Johnny Jarvis is the cool one,
and Johnny Jarvis is the cool one. And the two they make friends. They basically share a girlfriend in the course.
But that's the point, is that Johnny Jarvis is the cool one at school, but he ultimately goes down the more pedestrian route, the conservative route that working class bloke goes and does a job in a factory.
Yes.
But that's destined to die under Thatcherist policy.
Absolutely.
The deindustrialised policy.
Yeah.
Deindustrialisation. Whereas Lipton becomes part of more the what you might call the new media.
Indeed, he becomes a writer.
He's a creative
writer.
And the one with the working class angst.
Lucky bastard gets on telly with his stuff.
Yeah. And bizarrely, he never has a proper job, but he becomes the voice of working class angst.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas Johnny Jarvis is the expression of working class angst, because he's the poor bucker who does everything right but doesn't get a break. Oh, I love those little cafes. Yeah. There used to be a lovely one in Southampton, a bit like that survived into the 90s. Yeah. There used to be one, this Greek couple, cup of tea, boiled egg.
No podcast involving myself would be complete without the odd hormonal observation. And I have here a very much a partner in crime with that. All 4 decades of our friendship, as well as creating immense science fiction scenarios, we've also had a lifelong appreciation of the opposite sex, and we have Joanna Hargreaves here with a very colourful hair, and she really is genuinely good-looking girl.
Yeah,
as indeed a lot of punks.
Yeah. I mean, that's a proper pub from the 70s, early 80s.
Pub, yes. We had a
crap
70s
wallpaper.
Pub with crap wallpaper. I had crap. The house we moved into.
Golden shit brown wallpaper.
Yes.
Manhattan. Oh, that's a proper bar.
And very much it shows a genuine mixed race London.
Yeah,
as well.
Yes. You can't escape that. I just remember South London, which I used to visit a lot. It's an uncle living there. Yeah, it was. That's what I like. It is actually spot on. It's that wonderful weird mixing pot because anything goes. You used to have Rastafarians wandering down the street and stuff. I said down the Elephant Castle.
And Morris Colburn's character is very cleverly ambiguous.
Yes.
He's into some racket, but we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Do You Think I'm Sexy by Rod Stewart? I mean, that is the end of 78 for sure. That's for me.
Oh, that's a proper front of a boozer though there. That's, you don't get those anymore. Well, you do, but they're very rare.
I love the fact that the punk character actually, she's not too angry or anything. She just likes to hang out with these guys and gets involved and runs around and has capers with them. I
Well,
really like that.
Yeah, well, that was a bit 70s, 80s. She had capers.
But she doesn't give them attitude or anything. She's
No.
just a nice girl that chooses to be a punk.
Well, life used to be a bit like this sometimes.
Maurice Colborne, just months before he was Lytton.
Get you out of bad company.
That's always a good luck check shirt and a trench coat. I love the fact he's got really bad glasses as well. It's a wonderful memory of that time. No one did good glasses. Just love that gravelly voice of Maurice Colborne.
Yes.
There's only two blokes who do gravelly and that sort of stuff. It's him and Morris Rose.
Keith
Andrews.
He's another superb actor.
I was watching it the other day,
So
Bank Holiday Monday,
Yeah.
in fact, the Eagle has landed. I said,
Yeah.
it's Morris Rose.
Oh, I love Eagles Landing. We watched that on New Year's Eve.
That is, yeah.
He also parental tension between Ian Sears' character, who's supposed to be, as you say, a nice boy. He turns from nice boy. He's almost trying to prove something because he's been bullied at school.
Well, he's angry about something. He's
Yeah.
not quite sure what.
Yeah.
I didn't know my dad. Oh, fair enough. And he's given this wonderful fantasy world of Maurice Colborne as a dad.
Yeah.
It's something that I like about that whole point is that he has that fantasy world of an old man.
Yeah.
And Maurice Colborne's character has had this sort of exciting life in a way, but it's a bit tawdry, as it turns out. He's not really a nice character. He has the exciting life.
Yes, they just see the excitement part. They don't.
Yeah,
see the...
well, that's what being young is all about.
Yeah, you see all sorts of different jobs that they do, and a lot of it's mechanical. Some employers are sympathetic, and others are complete arseholes.
Well, what I like about the workshop is this is what at Highbury, sort of under the surface, we're trained to do.
Exactly.
Metal work.
Yes, I did college day release, which is very similar to this. And I would have started it when Johnny Jarvis went out. Half a day at the college doing things just like this, metalwork, plumbing.
Well, I remember Mr. Barnes
Carpentry.
as the metalwork teacher.
Yeah,
a wonderful man. But he'd always teach you to do things to British standard.
Yes,
the British industrial standard. That's what you got to do, lads. This is it. This. Good man, because he was one of those that generation teacher who had ex-army.
Yeah,
and according to Mr. Herworth, could swear and chat up women in 15 different languages. But I'm not sure if we believe anything Mr. Herworth had to say.
Also, you notice that the mum in the Black family is got very 1950s attire.
Well, yeah, I was about to mention this because this is a shift you have in sort of even black culture in London, which I think is not always addressed. Is you have those two different generations. You have the ones that came over in Windrush from the West Indies. Windrush is a simple thing, but that generation came over. They were always very smartly dressed, and they'd have this wonderful sing-song accent. They always have a waistcoat on, a trilby hat. People say, it's a cliche. No, they exist. They play dominoes, bit of chess here and there. And then you get the children come on there, slightly, completely different culture. The Windrush generation, people who came over in the 50s, 60s, they had a distinct culture and they kept to it. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
The generation after them, they encountered a lot of nasty racism, and they had a bit of an attitude. And I don't blame him. But then you get it like his uncle's a bit of a dodgy builder.
Right. And his uncle, of course, is played by Jim Finley, who's basically almost breakdancing there. He's such an eccentric character. Yeah. And yet he was dead serious as Mercer in Resurrection of the Daleks, also with Maurice Colborne. Is that Kevin Lloyd?
Yeah, it is.
Kevin Lloyd is a copper.
Pre the bill.
Pre-bill. So loads of familiar faces. And good to go. Do we know, with the writer, what else has he done?
I don't know. I mean, I've got the novelisation of Johnny Jarvis. I bought ages ago when it wasn't out on DVD to remind myself what happened with it. Plus the usual perfunctory novelisation.
Yeah.
And the series is so much better because you get this. This is almost. It's 5 years out, but they've recreated the past quite well. Oh, God, I mean, a rusty old transit. It's beautiful.
Yeah. You've got the culture on two different levels, very much the black and the white level.
And what I love is that it plays fair on the black thing. It's not patronising, it's a matter of fact. the acceptance, which perhaps in even the 80s and 90s becomes slightly patronising. You have to have a black character in there, and they have to say that. No, it's quite well done.
Yeah.
I'd love to know how the writer approached this, because they're not necessarily sympathetic, and particularly his uncle, because he's a bloody dodgy builder, but he's a lovely character. Now, this is the other thing. The army surplus shirt he's wearing, that is very 70s, 80s, because they got rid of all of that sort of stuff and it went over that camouflage. So these were massively on the market. The MOD at this point got rid of a load of old army shirts, and they were all like that.
Yeah.
And so anyone who wanted to be the street corner Marxist would go and buy a bit of army surplus. Gonna wear that. Which is my main problem when they did Dare the Daleks, the enhanced version. That they quite correctly, the uniforms, the unit people there are, that's what they wore in the 70s, but sadly, you're wearing the camouflage stuff, and sadly, in most of Doctor Who, they didn't. They wore the olive green, and it just jars slightly.
Yeah.
But that's my problem with the special edition of Day of the Daleks. I like it in all love respects, but you got the uniforms wrong, son. Details. But yeah, this is actually this is old wartime battle dress from the 50s. All he needs is a beret with a sheriff's badge on it.
Che Guevara.
That is what is. Fair enough. That is what the 70s and early 80s was a bit like. I mean, we laugh at Citizen Smith now. Yes, it is not a bad reflection of.
There's also you see them trying to without those who you've got a sort of Lipton who doesn't have a plan and then comes up on top with the writing.
Yeah, it's more by luck than chance.
And you have
history. It goes his way.
And you have Joanna Hargreaves' character who isn't quite sure which one.
Well, she's off the moment. That's the point. Is that Lipton is basically he doesn't realise that he is the future. It's the creative. Oh, hello, and she's at the moment, and Johnny Jarvis is
what a moment.
Hey, Johnny Jarvis is the past. He's doing everything right. Poor bastard. So this is it. This is what you always wanted as a kid, wasn't it? To be a sex symbol, bad natural health glasses, greasy hair, and some army surplus. Well, you might have done in London. No, not in Salisbury.
And got me writing on the telly.
Your mistake was living in Salisbury.
He's an obnoxious little twat, but
he is. Yeah.
I kind of would have liked to have been.
Well, that's the point. When I watched the original, I thought he's the main character. He's the hero. I like him. It's called John Jarvis. Oh yeah, that's the subversive thing. Lipton's the hero.
Yeah.
When you rewatch it, he is such a twat, and you do feel sorry for Jarvis because he does everything right, but history is not on his side.
But when you first
he's emasculated by Thatcher.
Yeah. When you first
a little bit of politics.
Yeah. When you first see the two, you think it's going to go very much the other way.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, well, it's the title of the series. Well, that's the point. It's the title of the series, Johnny Jarvis. It's about him, but poor bastard chose the wrong side. This is Thatcher's Britain, son.
I mean, you might never take it off. You might not take it off by the Christmas after next Christmas.
Yeah, I never got that laugh when I did that. Yeah, it's tragic. Your body gets more advanced than you're doing.
Yeah.
Tricks you into stupid ideas. So that's the thing I do like is the use of cars. These are all the proper cars of the period.
Yeah.
Obviously you can still get them. It's 83, but it's just.
And you've got Nick Stringer, who was a very well-known character actor. He was in The Professionals. He was in Press Gang.
Yeah. Oh, just that street scene there. Morris Minor estate, a camper van.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not, it's a British Leyland camper van.
Out a camper van.
Brown sofa. That is. I'll still have a brown sofa. So 70s. The little little adjustments there, little bit of wood on the side.
Yes.
Classy. And the hanging down bits there, I'm not sure what they call those, but so you don't.
Oh, the runners. Yeah.
The runners. You get your greasy hair on the back of the seat of the sofa. That's the wonderful thing. It's the way his mother's wearing that really garish top.
Yeah.
And we all remember our mothers wearing.
Oh, goodness.
What is very conservative look, and then this amazingly floral garish shirt, sitting there doing your knitting.
My mum had horn-rimmed Mary Whitehouse glasses.
Yeah, and presumably there's some garish shirt, garish blouse, brown sofa, and sat there doing the knitting. Hello, dear.
Yes.
And they're always knitting something in a terrible colour. In this case, that's actually not too bad a black, but it's always an orange. Brown and orange, yes, it'll do you.
Unfortunately, yes. My mother got wind that I liked Aaron sweaters, and my favourite colour was orange. Unfortunately, she tragically combined the two. with ghastly results. Yeah, despite his kind of Jack the Lad thing, he's actually... Johnny Jarvis is actually quite a mum's boy, really, isn't he?
He's a mum's boy, he's very conservative.
Yes.
In the way that actually, in some ways, Lipton's a mummy's boy, but reacts against it.
Yes.
He's got nothing but a mummy.
Yes.
The old Rover police cars.
And you've got the sort of...
Trouble is, I know ex-skinheads, and they're so conservative these days.
Yeah. Somebody...
Never said it like in 1980.
Yeah. Does someone gets thrown through the window or something?
Yeah.
Or am I thinking of the Boys from the Black Stuff? Again, that
gives a job.
Yeah, I mean, this came
Gives a
out
job.
of the whole spate of more working class, post-Thatchery. This was a kind of.
It's not in post-Thatchery. It's
in Thatchery.
In Thatchery, yeah.
This is
basically saying this is what Thatcherism's like, son.
Yeah, I mean,
it sold you short.
This
a little bit of politics.
Previous year was the Boys from the Black Stuff, which of course had been started Thatcher.
It's the woolly hat, check shirt, and that reefer jacket. Lovely look.
Yeah.
Bloody Sherpa van as an ambulance. Oh, that is a hospital corridor from that period.
Yeah. The infirmary.
Yes.
We're looking at a hospital now that, very much like the infirmary at Salisbury.
This horrible green painted
Which,
walls.
frankly, I would have liked to have had a crack at, working-wise. It's a lovely old building.
Oh, it's a lovely old building, but in the 80s, I mean, they used to have the whole windows open with sash cramps. It was literally falling apart.
Yeah.
And my gran was dying in there against it. And they'd actually have these props holding the window, the lintels together. It was awful. And then, that was your healthcare.
I thought you might. They weren't too helpful.
Now that another way, dressing gown and pyjamas. This is almost like Carry On Doctor. But yeah, that's how people used to dress in the hospital.
Yes. Lytton with a catheter. If he had survived, I would have loved to have seen what Maurice Colborne would have done in the 90s and even noughties, as he an older Maurice Colborne, in sort of more sinister parts.
Yeah, I mean, I've also wondered if the whole Johnny Jarvis series, it would have been interesting to have done a 90s sort of take on where the characters had gone in the 90s. What would Johnny Jarvis' future have been? And indeed, would Lipton have been like lording it up on Cool Britannia?
And
still pretending to be the angry young man, but actually well in with the
trying
crowd.
To Jarvis Cocker and things like that.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an interesting take.
We also, I mean, you and I have had multiple experiences of working with characters in What If.
Yeah.
Let's see what they're like down the line.
Yeah.
We've explored that so many times ourselves. It's actually interesting to...
Well, the main thing I keep thinking of Johnny Jarvis is how much was this influenced by the original stage presentation of Our Friends in the North.
Oh, right.
Which went from 64 through to 79, the original stage presentation. And how much that actually influenced the idea of doing something across a few years.
Yes.
But then actually the TV version of Our Friends in the North actually then extends out to about the contemporary point of 94.
Yeah.
So you actually then do see what happens to these characters. And I always thought, what would happen if you extended these characters into the 90s or even into the early 2000s? I mean...
And you actually did have literally a stellar cast there because Joanna Hargreaves plays Stella.
Well, that's the interesting thing, I think, is something that comes up in Our Friends in the North, and I think would be interesting to these characters. What would happen to Stella Hargreaves' character into the 90s as women become slightly more important?
Yeah.
That actually, because Johnny Jarvis is a man who's lost his way, does his wife then go on to become the breadwinner?
Absolutely. And I have to say here, we watched an episode, and I've forgotten that a certain person isn't in it. That is Gary Shale.
Oh,
who?
Yes, who's magnificent. I've got to say it, it's superb.
He's TV viewers will remember him not only for Quadrophenia, but also in Stevie in Metal Mickey, and
Boogie Boogie,
a Boogie Boogie Stevie Baby. And I and Joe's great aunt met him 2 years ago when he opened the St Martin's Church Fete, and I can say he's a lovely guy. He's very down to earth, and he was not too cool for school to open a church fete, and with lots of old ladies, including Chris Biggins's mum was there as well with your aunt. I think she was talking to your aunt.
My aunt would talk to anyone.
Yeah, she was a lovely
and
lady.
frequently did.
But no, it was good. It was a lovely, lovely occasion, and it was great to meet Gary, who actually does the soundtrack for this.
Yeah.
And here's a little, because I'm on Facebook with Gary Shale, and I don't know if it's widely known, but there were fake Johnny Jarvis DVDs going out before this came out. It was on Amazon with a very authentic looking cover, but somebody was saying, no, don't go for those. They're just fan copies, and this came up with a different cover on Amazon, and I messaged him and I said, it's come up again with another cover. Is this on the level? Is this the real thing this time? And he said, oh right, I don't know. And he went off and said, yeah, apparently it is kosher. I'm just talked to my agent.
Oh, yeah.
And of course he did the soundtrack, and of course he played. He's in it.
Yes,
playing one of the characters.
Yeah, and he's superb.
He is.
I don't understand why he's not a bigger actor. He's good. He's brilliant.
He's
Knocks it out the park.
Still very much into his stuff, and he produced a mod Christmas song a couple of years ago, which is really, really good.
But it's the way he plays his friendship with listeners at the right level of antagonism but true friendship under the surface. It's a very nuanced performance, which is the best thing you say for an actor.
Yeah.
He's nuanced.
Yes,
it's a beautiful thing to watch.
You've got dodgy characters who aren't particularly unpleasant.
Yeah, and he's actually one of the few characters who turns out you think he's going to be nasty, and he's all right.
Yeah,
he's a nice bloke. He's a bit punky. He's a bit, but. Yeah, he turns out to be one of the good guys.
He's quite sensitive, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, it's a beautiful performance. As I said to you when I rewatched it, I thought Gary Shell, he knocks it out of the park. It's a superb performance.
Yeah, but everyone's quite natural.
The whole cast are good. Gary Shell, particularly though, there's just something about his performance. It just gets it.
I have a feeling Mark Farmer was ex Grange Hill.
Yeah, they did the whole thing of a lot of the cast were ex Grange Hill because that's the vibe they wanted to go with.
Yes,
coming out
almost post Grange Hill. Yeah.
And it's that idea. It's Grange Hill gone bad.
Yes,
because Grange Hill meets reality.
It's funny. Ian Sears disappeared after this. There was K9 and Company, as we mentioned before, and this. He's a
K9 and Company also has, of course, the bloke who goes on to be Uncle Frank in Hellraiser.
Yes, yeah. But
and Inspector Lestrade.
Yes, he's given an enormous part in this, and yet you don't hear about him after this, do you?
I don't know. The problem with Johnny Jarvis is the fact this was just laid forgotten for so long in the archives, and it is.
Is it because it's so? It's very left wing.
Well, it's left wing. It's very political. Well, you can't escape this sort of thing in the 80s. You're being creative in the 80s.
Yeah,
and
we were working together when this went out. Yeah,
but the problem is there's a lot of lazy 80s leftism. But this is actually a very thoughtful, thought-provoking, and it's truly good work. It's I can't sound the praises of the series enough. It's superb, and the fact it smells of the period.
Also, I think some people like ourselves who,
we lived it.
We lived it. We were friends for a large portion of the show. But
for you, 77.
77 is when I started the Magnet Editor. Yes,
start the Magnet Editor, the Jubilee,
and I had a lot of series cooking at that time. Not as well documented as the Magnet Editor, but I got my first sight of colour TV. I got drunk for the first time. I was only 8 at the time, but no, and the episodes are actually they couple these years together, like with 77, 78, 78, 79, and so on and so on, until you get to 83, which is when it was made.
Yeah.
And
it ends with the election.
Yes, exactly. And you've also got this whole kind of thing. It's like it's done like a school year.
Yeah.
So in actual fact, which makes Johnny Jarvis about a year younger than my sister, because she actually left in early 77. So her last year would have been 76, 77.
Well, I like the 83s. It did have you left thinking about what your future was actually going to be. And,
absolutely.
Probably one of the first generations we actually had a musings on how crap it might actually be.
Yeah, and it must have struck a chord with me because I was in my penultimate year when it went out, and everybody was thinking of the future when they left in '85, and I was quite hard nuts were coming up to me and said, "What do you think about leaving school?" I said, "Yeah, I'm up for it." And a lot of people were actually scared.
Just usually the hard ones who thought,
exactly.
I could go and work.
A lot of them were really scared about.
Yes, I used to get that vibe off people because, of course, I mean, the whole nature of industry was changing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the point of the series, is that those small shops you've got for industry, Johnny Jarvis goes into, they were dying out at this period. And so a lot of the jobs that were being trained for somewhere like Highbury were actually disappearing, which probably actually sort of got an idea of, maybe I should do A-levels.
Yeah.
Maybe I should go for university and learn...
I wasn't one of those people. I had quite enough of academia.
Well, I had two brothers had already gone for it, and I thought, maybe I should think about this rather than... Because all this industrial stuff they're teaching me is all well and good, but there isn't a future in it. And thanks to a series like this that I was watching, I kind of realised that there's not a future in it. I mean, I don't regret it now because I can do most of my home repairs and I can do a bit of basic carpentry. I love Highbury for that, but I mean, there's no future in most of what they're teaching at that point. It was a dead end.
It was very old-fashioned teaching that we had, and of course this is what is portrayed in the show.
This is his point.
It's very much a school era that we recognised.
I think it's probably this that led me to get a university.
Yes,
I've even met people in the pub who basically bowed down to me. So, you went to Highbury. We went to Highbury. I went to university.
I get that. It was almost like a badge of honour. I mean,
yeah. Calm down, guys.
Johnny Jarvis, a very, very effective classic.
The thing is, it's very much a trip down memory lane, but the fact is that when you saw it originally, it spoke because that's what you remembered. And it still runs today as well. It smells and looks like the period it's in, the 70s to early 80s, all the way through this. That's how we remember it.
Yeah.
We live through this, and because it represents it as being a bit crap. And that's exactly what it was like. It's slightly disappointing. It's not... What you might see in films and whatever is that highlight, that wonderful thing that was out there. This is actually what it was like. It was something good was going on somewhere else. And we got the crap wallpaper and the bad paintings on the wall. But we still remember them fondly.
Yes, exactly.
Strangely, even though you'd never have them on the wall now.
No, not.
But it's a bit of nostalgia.
Without a sense of irony.
No. But it brings back those memories when you see it, and it's that is you can actually feel yourself right back in the period.
Absolutely.
And it's not many times because if you see something that tries now to replicate that, it feels what it is a replication, and the only thing I saw that tried to recreate the 70s was that the BBC adaptation of Little Drummer Girl, which tried a slightly stylised version of the 70s, but didn't cheat on it. It didn't make it look really good. It made it look slightly crappy. It did slightly stylised. It went for a very 70s colour scheme. So it's slightly stylised, but it kind of made the 70s look a bit washed out. And I thought that's one of the few times I've seen it look done by modern eyes correctly. And this is done by more contemporary eyes, and it's. If you want to know what it was like, Johnny Jarvis is your series. That is spot on.
Yeah,
it is spot on.
Nick and Jo will return next issue.
They will.
And that's just about it in terms of links.
It is.
So we'll say thank you for listening because we're going to go into the end credits after the next article. So Warren, as we said, joins us all snuggled up on the sofa as we look at
Yes, Minister, party games.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Tomorrow, BBC Two pays a special visit to the Ministry of Administrative Affairs for Yes, Minister, starring Paul Eddington and Nigel Hawthorne.
Minister, I have some very grave news. Yes. The relationship, which I might tentatively venture to aver has been not without some degree of reciprocal utility and perhaps even occasional gratification, is approaching a point of irreversible bifurcation and, to be brief, is in the propinquity of its ultimate regrettable termination.
A special hour-long edition of Yes Minister tomorrow at 8:30 on BBC Two.
I see.
Good evening, Lisa.
Good afternoon, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Warren.
Buenos tardes.
Good afternoon, Warren.
Buenos noches.
I've not shown you my notches yet.
Bangers.
Yeah, we are doing.
Well,
Yes.
No, we have done Yes Minister party games.
Yes, we've had a look at it.
From December 1984.
Yes, it's the hottest day of the year, and we've been staying in watching Yes Minister.
We've been sweating over James Hacker.
Watching a Christmas special.
A Christmas special.
But why is this a good time to do this episode?
This is a good time because currently in the United Kingdom...
We're all going down the Swanee.
There are two of the three main political parties have leadership elections.
I'm sure the third one are joining because
at some point
soon.
Yeah. And also in America, they're starting the run up to the sort of
primaries, isn't it?
The primaries, the 2020 election.
Vote Quimby.
So,
but I mean, we won't go too much into the detail of the sort of background of the series in this one because it's one of these series I regard as being an essential part of your DVD collection.
Yes. It's long overdue to do it.
So as we pick up, we've still got the familiar title sequence by Gerald Scarfe, which inspired Martin Holmes to do a drawing of
wonderful drawing
of us in the same style.
Yes,
and the theme tune as well. It's more the end theme tune because I always get it mixed up with "To the Manor Born." It's very similar.
It is quite similar.
Yes, very similar.
Yeah.
But we start off. Jim Hacker's at the DAA, and Bernard presents him with
the Department
of Administrative Affairs. Thank you. And Bernard, his secretary, his private secretary.
Yes.
He's not the secretary because he doesn't do the typing.
No.
Presents him with piles of Christmas cards
yes.
to sign.
And they've all got to be signed in slightly different ways, haven't they?
These you sign Jim, these you sign Jim Hacker, these you sign Annie and Jim Hacker, these you sign Love from Annie and Jim, and so on. Now,
a licky sticker.
I said this is 1984, and sort of Nick and Joe in their article about Johnny Jarvis talk about sort of leaving school and jobs and things like that. And it's around this time that I would have been thinking, what sort of job could I do? And I didn't really have much of an idea. But when I watch shows, I used to think, which one would I be in this situation? And I was always Bernard in my head. That, you know, he was I could see myself doing Bernard's job.
No,
because basically Bernard didn't seem to do anything.
He just stood there and agreed and sort of gerrymandered about anything and had an opinion, but was always shot down by Sir Humphrey.
Yes.
1984 was the year I met you.
Ah, right, there you go. There's a throwaway line here at this point where they refer to Jim as the party chairman.
Yes.
And to me, that's extremely unlikely because I don't know how he'd end up in that situation.
Yeah, usually party chairmen have been in far more senior positions.
But it does become important later on in the episode, so we shall see. But
party chairman's usually a point that their career is not going to go any further, but they've been a loyal supporter to the Prime Minister usually, so they are sort of manoeuvred, shall we say, into that convenient position.
But Jim's sort of been talking to Maurice from Brussels.
Maurice.
Who we do get to see
Sounds
later.
like some cheap porn star.
Well, who is Maurice? Because we get to meet him later.
Oh,
don't
he's
we?
from Moonbase.
He's from the Moonbase.
Andre Moran.
With his cravat.
With his cravat.
Yes,
Yeah.
those shady ladies from Argentina.
And of course, also known at this point for the Pink Panther movies.
Yes, as...
He's the sergeant, isn't he?
He is the sergeant.
Yeah. But, yeah, this is all about the Euro sausage. And how the EEC is going to make...
Outlaw the British banger.
Outlaw the British banger. Now,
rename it, not outlaw it.
Yes.
It was that was a red herring, forgive the sausage pun.
Yeah, because the British sausage only contains 26% meat, of which is mostly gristle. So under EEC regulations, you can't call it the Euro sausage.
Did you have a tasty
or a
banger?
sausage?
Or a sausage.
Did you have a tasty
I
banger
did. I
today?
did actually have sausages for lunch today, but I'd just like to say that they were 70% meat.
How would you describe your sausage?
Sort of short and fat.
Satisfying?
Yeah, satisfying.
Okay,
yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But yes, it would have to be renamed the emulsified high-fat offal tube. But yes,
Lovely.
And there's an example of one of sort of Bernard's sort of bits of pedantry when Jim says about we'll have to grit our teeth and bite the bullet, and
he goes into his logic, doesn't he?
Bernard points out that if you grit your teeth, you can't bite a bullet. But yeah, there's some talk about the presents that Jim's got to give out to the DAA, which is sherry and mince, basically,
which are spot on accurate.
Yeah, are they?
Yes, they are. Yes. My mum was the housekeeper for Lord and Lady Cranbourne. Lord Cranbourne was a Tory MP at the time for West Dorset, and each year, depending upon what you contributed to the party, you either got a bottle of sherry or a packet, extra strong, a box of House of Commons mince. And we used to get boxes of House of Commons mince.
Because you do see them later at the party, because they're holding them under their sort of
and they're
arms.
genuine boxes as well. Yeah.
Bernard wants a surprise, and the customary surprise is a bottle of champagne. Yeah. But Sir Humphrey's been called off to a meeting with the Cabinet Secretary, Sir Arnold.
I imagine it's sort of somebody in a room full of wood, making cabinets in a corner.
But Sir Arnold's thinking about retiring early, and his first concern is to what jobs can his successor
away, isn't he?
slip his way. It's almost like he's got a Christmas list of jobs I would like to do, because there's
via bribery and corruption.
Yeah, the Chancellorship of Oxford, and wasn't it? Is it
there was
the Anglo-Caribbean thing in the winter months?
There was no sort of let's go low and work our way up. Let's just reach the top and stay at the ceiling.
But Sir Arnold's thinking about joining the Campaign for Freedom for Information, which surprises Sir Humphrey. But he says that if he's head of it, then the freedom won't be abused.
Absolutely. And that's quite apt, really.
That's a
isn't it?
wonderful
Yes.
cynical line. And there's lots of cynical moments in this one. Basically, Sir Humphrey is being lined up for the job as Cabinet Secretary, isn't he? And sort of Sir Arnold says, I gave various advice to the PM that I'd like hushed up about arming troops when they're sort of on strike, dealing with strikes and things like that.
It was wonderful the way in which we as the outsiders are watching this wonderful almost dance as they move around each other to manoeuvre and outdo each other in descriptive terms. And then, but the plain and simple thing is they are both working together to con everyone.
Yeah. Well, what I love about this show is not only is the sort of plotting very much like a chess game, whereas one person will move one piece to, as you say, to manoeuvre against somebody else, but also the way language is used.
Yes.
Where they will make it clear what they want without ever actually saying the thing and committing to anything.
And everything they ask does not have a yes/no answer.
Yeah, that's right. But later on, Sir Humphrey tells Jim in a rather roundabout way that they're not going to be seeing each other soon.
Well, he's not going to be with him anymore.
Because not long for this world.
Yeah, because then he says, "But we'll still be seeing each other," and Jim gets a little bit worried at that, doesn't he?
Well, Jim starts to sort of sob into his hanky because he thinks Sir Humphrey's going to die.
Yeah.
Then when he's told he's going to see him again, I almost imagine he thinks like Sir Humphrey's going to come back as a ghost and haunt him.
What advise him?
There's a completely different series altogether.
Yeah, so there's the spin-off series. Yeah. But I like the thing that
Humpy.
Once they work out what they're talking about, sort of Sir Humphrey is slightly concerned that Jim's going to pieces, but Jim doesn't want Sir Humphrey's sympathy, because that would be sort of showing a weakness.
Yes, which you don't do to the cabinet secretary.
No. And when he realises that the cabinet secretary sort of advises on appointments,
he's right in there like a rat up a drain pipe.
Then Jim is immediately crawling to Sir Humphrey about how brilliant he's been. And I like Sir Humphrey's thing about I couldn't have asked for a better minister. Which basically
it was almost vomit ridden, wasn't it?
Well, it basically means that Jim has not been too much trouble.
Yes, he's
been under control.
He's kept within what he should. He kept within his remit quite healthily.
Because there's a phrase the civil service has about ministers being house trained.
Yes,
and that's what you get here. Later at the Christmas drinks party, which is one of those wonderful sort of awkward gatherings of people who never have to talk to each other.
You can imagine.
Where the top man, he doesn't really know any of their names.
No. You know,
he's just going around going, "You having a good time?
Would you like another drink? Would you like a top up?" I was thinking exactly the same. He has no idea who the people are that work with him. He takes everything they do for granted.
Yeah.
I mean, Jim is already 3 sheets to the wind, isn't he? If not 4. And I love the bit where he starts playing with the hair of I don't know
some
who she
secretary
is,
or some random person. Yeah.
But he's trying to be friendly, and that's the first thing that comes into his head.
Yeah. And his wife is stone cold sober,
just looking disapproving.
Very much so. Yes.
I like the line about we're a team, unlike the cabinet.
Then he remembers Humphrey's going to be cabinet secretary and tries to say the shadow cabinet, of course.
He refers to Humphrey as Humpy at one point. And so Humphrey sort of gives a little speech and sort of emphasises the don't drink and drive campaign that's on at the moment. So next, Jim's driving home at all of 10 miles an hour?
To avoid the curb from jumping out and hitting him.
I'm driving perfectly stably, as he says. And of course,
the jam sandwich
turns its lights on. And what was it you said, Lisa? The audience go, "Oh!"
Ooh, yeah, they get alarmed. Oh, yes.
Yeah. But now there's a reference made to a silver badge. Now, what is a silver badge? Is there such a thing?
The silver badge wouldn't have entitled him to get away for being under the influence whilst drinking whilst driving. He can park in sort of restricted areas and say if the police have closed the road off and he wants to get down there, and he shows this, and it's almost a parliamentary privilege.
Is it?
But for ministers only.
Is there a gold badge if there's a silver badge?
Yes.
There is a gold badge.
There is a gold badge, but it's not held by members of the Parliament. It's held by members of the Crown.
Ah.
They can do anything they want.
They can. So the Queen, within reason.
So the Queen can do ton-ups.
Yeah. I could remind people that Princess Anne got points on her licence.
Oh yes.
For her driving.
Yeah.
But you're not really going to stop the Queen if the Queen's doing it.
Well, if I haven't hit my figures for the month, Lizzie's coming in.
Pull her over. Blow into the bag, Mum. I'll hold your rings. Yeah. But yeah. So his wife takes over the driving as Jim collapses, basically in the gutter.
Yes.
I think, but at this point, because I know you said that it wouldn't entitle him to that, but I think they just sort of think, oh, is it really worth it because of who he is and what he's got?
Well,
so they just let it go.
If you read the novelisation, which it does have a few extra bits and pieces in it. There's a reference to like the what was it, the security guard. He gave his security guard the slip, and then the police turned a blind eye, which shows they weren't very experienced or something like that. So lack of training or something. So it is sort of papered over a bit in the book later.
Is that for him or for somebody else? Though?
No, that was for the Home Secretary.
Yeah. Who we're going to get onto now?
Yeah.
But
the security guard the slip. You can see him like sneaking out some bog window.
But
the shady lady from Argentina.
But Jim and Sir Humphrey have a meeting, and basically Humphrey has to tell Jim off without telling him off. Basically. But of course, the Home Secretary's had a similar incident where his car collided with a lorry carrying nuclear waste,
which overturned,
and then rebounded into the car of the editor of a local newspaper. So inevitably, it leaked out.
And he says, "What, the nuclear waste?" Yeah.
So yeah, basically picked up piss in his own constituency, isn't he? But yes, so. And I just love the line about what's going to happen to the Home Secretary. He was as drunk as a lord, so
they'll give him a seat in the Lord.
So they're probably making one, yes.
Which is probably very apt and very true.
But all through this sort of episode, it's very much, if you're in a certain position of power, you are, to some extent, protected from
You will never
real
go
life.
down, you will always go up.
Yeah.
So if you drop that clanger, they will put you quietly away in a nice little seat somewhere, yes.
Just be quiet and don't cause any more trouble.
Exactly. Be grateful for what we're giving you. It's
But
very much that attitude.
At home with Annie and Bernard now. Bernard's got to lick stamps, and he doesn't want to at first because he thinks it would be government lick, basically. Yeah, he's not.
That's so wrong.
That's what it says in the book. Technically, it will be government lick, but yes, a reshuffle is announced by Moira Stewart on the telly.
Not a reshuffle. It's announced that the Prime Minister is resigning.
Well, yes. Moira Stewart is on the telly, which Annie operates with a huge remote control.
Oh, yes.
That probably goes clonk.
I'm looking at this recorder as we talk, which is at
actually
least
smaller than
the remote control.
Well, at least it's not on a wire connecting it to the telly.
Wow, I love those.
But yeah, the PM's going to retire in the new year.
Because he was waiting for the Home Secretary to burger off.
Yeah. Jim comes in, they've had an emergency cabinet meeting. Rumours are that the PM was a secret CIA or KGB agent, or there might have been £1 million of diamonds in a safe somewhere. None of which turns out to be true.
You can imagine a Prime Minister, top hat, cape, twirling his moustache, going, wah, as he runs from number 10.
But the great line, never believe anything until it's officially denied.
Yes.
Which
is very true, isn't it?
So there's obviously got to be a new PM, so it's probably going to be down to Eric or Duncan.
Can you imagine having a Prime Minister called Eric?
Eric, yes. So Eric is the Chancellor and Duncan's the Foreign Secretary.
Yes.
Do you think they went for the most unappetising names for Prime Minister?
Possibly.
And
meanwhile, on the other page,
Peter Jeffrey and Philip Stone.
Well, I like the fact that, again, in the book, Peter Jeffrey plays Eric Jeffries, so they didn't think too hard about his surname. Jim is sort of called in by both of them to see who he's going to support, and he keeps saying he has to appear impartial, but they said it's all right. You can.
He bends in the winds, doesn't he? Oh, hello.
Hello. Oh, apparently you're not working, Lisa.
Oh, why is it telling you that? Sorry. Sorry. Good girl.
Everything's going off.
You can start hammering next door now.
But yeah, Jim has to appear impartial, but so long as everybody knows who he supports, that's all right.
So the problem is Jim's has been bribed, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Mercilessly.
Yes, with the promise of whichever candidate becomes Prime Minister to have their job.
Home Secretary or Foreign Secretary, or if he doesn't support them, he's going to Northern Ireland.
Or Chancellor of the Exchequer.
That's it, yes.
But Arnold and Sir Humphrey have a meeting, and you do get the comedy basic line, how's things at the campaign for the freedom of information? I'm sorry, I can't talk about that. And they're discussing who should be PM, basically which lunatic should run the asylum.
Do you think that's how they feel now at the moment?
Definitely,
yes, definitely. Yes.
Oh, that's why this episode is so worth
spot
watching
on,
at the
isn't
moment.
it? Yes.
But the new PM, whoever he is out of the two,
Is nobody interested in history?
the new PM would probably split the party.
Yeah, one in 3 weeks, one in
3 months.
3 months.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're looking for a compromise candidate, somebody with no bright ideas who can be manipulated, professionally guided.
Definitely Mr. Hacker.
And then the idea of Jim crosses their mind, and Sir Humphrey just bellows with laughter. But maybe it's not impossible. Maybe it's not impossible. So,
and then Bernard turns up.
Well, Arnold suggests
first
first of all having a look at the MI5 files for Eric and Duncan, because it would be good for a laugh. And Bernard appears. They float the idea with him about Jim as the next PM, and he just looks at his watch.
So what are you looking? Are you in a hurry, Bernard?
I'm just checking to see it's not April the 1st. So
I remember that line from the original broadcast.
Their advice to Bernard is to ensure that Jim says and does nothing, basically, in the next few weeks.
Which is basically what his job entails usually anyway, isn't it?
So Jim's concerned about EEC waste, that there's one official who pays farmers to make loads of surpluses and then another one who pays them to destroy it all again.
Yeah.
Doesn't the futility of it worry you, Bernard? No, not really. I'm a civil servant. But yeah, then they discuss which job Jim would like if Eric or Duncan becomes PM. Does he want to be Foreign Secretary or Chancellor? And the trouble with the Chancellor, he's Mr. Killjoy, putting taxes on things. But Foreign Secretary, well, the British public want you to be nasty to foreigners, which really, ouch.
Yes, ouch.
Yeah.
And anyway, Britain's got no real power. We're just an American missile base. Which, for 1984,
is quite apt,
is a good
actually,
line.
yeah.
But Bernard plants the seed, doesn't he?
Yes, Bernard plants the seed.
So, the Chief Whip wants a meeting with...
Bird's Whip.
Bird's Whip. No, the Chief Whip is called to a meeting with Sir Humphrey and Jim. Basically, how can they get rid of Eric and Duncan?
They're going to do that. They're going to do their legs, aren't they?
Yeah, because of security question marks. So with Jim,
sorry,
you know what we're coming to.
Yes.
So Jim's party chairman.
Yes.
So
he can see the files.
Yes, but the Chief Whip
can't. Yeah.
Much to his frustration.
The Chief Whip just responds in like capital letters, Jim Hacker as PM. But there must have been a less likely PM at some point, though they can't think of one. But there's a security file on the Chancellor, an interview with his driver. Jim has a look at it. I love the way he puts on his glasses immediately to read it.
And his his eyes illuminate so widely.
And he mutters under his breath, dirty old.
Yeah, get it. Yes.
And apparently, the Chancellor has been indulging in a lot of, as Sir Humphrey puts it, horizontal jogging, is I believe.
It's term.
And there's various ladies.
I hadn't heard that for years.
And there's various ladies from various countries involved, including the shady lady from Argentina.
Glumphing in the roadies, my teacher used to call it.
There is some people that think this is just a cover for his real requirements, as they put it, which is ouch.
Yeah.
So he's not PM material apparently. So it's got to be Duncan. Yes, well, we were coming to that. And here's the financial report on all what Duncan's been up to,
and the fraud office investigation,
and revenue.
Yeah,
all of which was technically legal, which is one of those wonderful phrases. That...
It is so. Yes, the parallels of today.
Nothing much has changed in
nothing at all
in 35 years. That's the thing.
It's a slow burner, wasn't it? But it comes around again.
But yeah, the chief whip is sort of fed up at not being able to see all this. So Jim basically has got to get them to stand down because nobody else can do it. The chief whip can't because he hasn't seen the files, and Sir Humphrey can't because he can't get involved in party matters
because he's a civil servant.
Yeah. So they also suggest that Jim stage manage some public success. Basically be seen to be good at something. But in the meantime, don't let people know you want the job.
And this is the bit where Paul Eddington comes into his own, isn't it? His character comes into his own. He's not actually guided, and he could have made his character could have made an absolute hash of this, couldn't he?
Yeah.
But this is where Humphrey, I think, lets him go off.
Yeah.
Knowing it's safe.
Humphrey puts the key in and winds him up.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
He's a master manipulator, and this is one of those very good episodes for showing that, I think. But yeah,
but it's interesting that he can trust him not to make pills of it.
Yeah. But yeah, the thing is that the Prime Minister has to have the killer instinct. And I like
Jim Hacker does not have a killer instinct.
I don't think many of our recent Prime Ministers have had a killer instinct.
So Jim has meetings with Duncan and Eric, lets them know that he knows what they've been up
He's
to.
marked their cards, as we say.
Some wonderful eye acting from Paul Eddington when he sort of just widens his eyes a little to appear threatening. You know.
As if to say, I know exactly what you've been up to.
So the other
Dirty
two...
devil.
Yes.
The other two
Dirty
stand down.
Number 30.
Then there's a meeting with the European Commissioner, Maurice, about the British sausage. And again, Humphrey runs the meeting, and Jim just has to agree with him.
It's a puppet. It's the puppeteer working the puppet. It's classic, isn't it?
So the way round it is just to change the name to the British sausage with capital letters. Although the Commissioner denies that the two people involved in
offices next door to each other.
And not in the next door office. He's not even on the same floor. Yeah. And Jim's kissing at the end surprises him, I think.
He does. He looks a bit taken aback, doesn't he?
In come the correspondence from the papers, and Jim plants the story about the British sausage being made illegal. Because you've got to get bad news in the paper before you have a success.
Size of that video camera. It was huge.
That's a little bit later, but yeah. But yeah, Bernard sort of disapproves that the press will be printing something that isn't true. How shocking. Now, we actually get some filming in the back of the car briefly.
We do, yeah.
With Jim and Bernard. And normally this is done with sort of CSO.
But it's a nice little two-shot.
They're listening to the radio about where this is all going to go.
Which wasn't switched on.
Was it not?
No, because the screen wasn't illuminated.
But you've actually got proper steam in the back, in the sort of back window.
Do you think they put a load of people in there to make it hot?
To steam it up.
Steam it up so you didn't get reflection from the car lights and people seeing they're actually filming in there?
Well, I was trying to work out. You're going to have 4 people in there, aren't you? Because you've got to...
Yeah.
If somebody's actually driving it,
you're gonna have
and you've got a cameraman
but you're going to have a tail car as well, so you
and
don't
a
get
sound
some...
recordist.
That's true.
With his big
fluffy thing out.
Just because it was driving along the road doesn't actually mean it was driving along the road.
I could be on a trailer.
That's true. But the BBC and ITN cover Jim's speech on fire and safety policy in government buildings. Though when we see the film, he doesn't seem to be talking about that.
No, he's talking about something else, isn't he?
He's doing a big sort of "we're British and proud of it" speech. And they keep cutting to the applauding crowd as he's sort of running down the EEC, isn't he?
Another uncomfortable moment of parallels of today.
Complaining about how we've lost the threepenny bit and things like that. And we're going to be forced to eat garlic-ridden, greasy foods. Ouch. And then we zoom out from the footage, because it's being watched by Ludovic Kennedy.
Ludo, darling.
Going, "Did you see?" Basically. Jim does refer to him as Sir Ludovic at one point, which he's not in real life now, although he will become. But allegedly his knighthood was blocked by Margaret Thatcher, apparently. But yeah, will Jim be the new PM? Well, he has no ambitions in that direction. Well, Ludo, he says as well.
It's like an MP saying, "I'm resigning to spend more time with my family, even though I've dedicated my entire life for public service."
But this is a time for healing.
Oh, does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Little bit of politics. My name's Ben Elton.
Right, back to Sir Humphrey. There's been a party meeting, or the party meeting is going on when they're going to decide.
Do you think they actually have a party?
A proper party.
Jelly and ice cream.
Whether they're going to put up another candidate, and then Jim sort of gets all confused over the telephones. You know, which phone will he ring on? Well, that one, or that one, either really. But the phone goes, and Sir Humphrey sort of yes.
It's just that wonderful build-up, isn't there? Yes.
Bernard's got a message for you. In comes Bernard wanting to know whether Jim will be free to kiss hands at 5 o'clock at the palace if he's unopposed. And this is another sort of bit where the gears very slightly crunch. As to set up the new series, Jim asks whether Bernard would like to be his principal private secretary.
Draw him in.
Yeah. Because normally that wouldn't be his appointment to make.
No, it wouldn't be. No, that's the senior civil servant's appointment to make.
But
he would. Yeah.
Because the look on Humphrey's face actually puts that across, doesn't it?
Yeah, but so that's a bit of a stretch, but to keep the series going, you've got to have that line to cover it, because otherwise Bernard would just be back with the whoever the new minister was.
And he said, "Is that all right, Humphrey? Or the Prime Minister's word is law?"
Yeah. And the phone rings, and Jim picks up the wrong one, of course. Comedy Basic. And then, am I? Yes. Prime Minister. Dun, 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 dun. And do you notice the way he slips his arm in his jacket?
Oh, yes.
Just for the pose at the end. You know, now he's come to power.
Mhm.
But that is such a spot on episode, isn't it?
It is. You see so many parallels when you're watching it, particularly at this point in time.
Yeah.
And Margaret Thatcher did comment that the series was closer to the truth
Yeah.
than any other series that's been there. And for a comedy series to be able to hit something that's close to home is quite apt.
Well, they had very, very good sources.
Yeah, I was going to say they had an insider that gave them information.
Yeah. But for what was perhaps a very cynical show in 1984, it's astonishing how well it stands up in
it's sharp under the
2019.
scrutiny it is now,
Yes.
yes.
So I think that is...
It's worth a rewatch if you've not seen it, or worth a watch.
And I don't think it's a case of audiences being well educated now to review it. We have a clearer point of view of how we see the world working. Perhaps certain things have been removed from our beliefs in the establishment and that time back. And then you go back to something like the Profumo affair.
Yeah.
And we look at it in a completely different light now.
Yeah.
So it's just a generational thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go. Yes, Minister. Party Games.
Yeah, aptly named.
Longer episode, and I think it really makes use of those
It
extra
does.
15
Yes.
minutes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was episode 37 of Round the Archives.
Starring Lisa Parker, Andrew Trowbridge, Martin Holmes, Warren Cummings, Paul Chandler, Nick Goodman, and Jo Bunsell.
On the musical side, you heard Dan Tate and Paul Chandler.
The script for Yes Minister Party Games was by Anthony J. and Jonathan Lynn.
And the producer was Peter Whitmore.
But there is a throwaway line here, which does come to be more important later, with...
There's a cat knocking at the window.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Where were we? I'm going to have to cut that.
Unless he's banging. No, it couldn't be next door banging on your window, could they?
Wouldn't have thought so.
I don't think so. There's no shadow. So
it like
our
a
next door
tail,
neighbour's
you
doing DIY, so if you hear noise, that's what it
Yes.
is.
Right, where were we? But... totally forgotten that now.
Don't try... Oh, hello. Did you have those radishes again?